Hello, I'm Lee Bernick, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Urban Report. Tonight we have three guests with various activities and ideas. Our first guest is Philip Wallach, and Philip is from the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., and as part of the Brookings Institution, we have you out here visiting our division, the Brookings Mountain West, and you've been here for a week. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a great time.
And this is your first time out in Las Vegas, is that right?
It's my first time as far west anywhere in the U.S.
Okay, and so you grew up in the East, you went to school in Princeton, and then you moved over to the Brookings, right? And you're in the government studies?
Governance studies,
Government studies. And your area of expertise is on the bureaucracy and how bureaucracy interprets law and then creates regulation. Is that?
Yep.
Is that a fair interpretation?
The whole panoply of regulatory affairs.
Regulatory effects of this. And one of the questions, my first question, and then we'll get into some specific topical areas, is the question for me is how do the relationship between the legislature and the bureaucracy in terms of the bureaucracy taking the legislation, the law, and then maybe interpreting that and the intent of the law, how broad a scope is that for agencies?
Well, it's all going to depend on the language in the laws, and we have an awful lot of laws that are pretty vague, either because Congress intended them that way, because that sort of made it easier to compromise and get something passed, or because unintentionally Congress has anything but perfect foresight. So a lot of our very important statutes leave a lot of room for interpretation, and it's the executive branch and the bureaucrats in the agencies who are the ones making the primary interpretations.
Interpretation, and especially in environmental protection areas because of the technical issues. So that's one of the reasons why they made them purposely vague. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They wanted to give the agency flexibility to sort of assimilate new science and deal with the challenges based on their expertise, and that gives the agencies a lot of flexibility. Okay,
and in particular, we've been looking at, or I think you've been looking at, is it the Clean Air Act, right?
Yep.
And in the Clean Air, of course, then we get into the whole issue of emissions and power plants and other kinds of areas. But I think you've been working on emissions, is that?
Well, yeah, I've been specifically looking at greenhouse gas emissions, which are different from other kinds of pollutant, right? Sulfur dioxide or nitrogen dioxide, those things make the air hard to breathe and make people sick. Carbon dioxide is different, right? We're worried about its effect on global climate change, but we're all breathing out carbon dioxide all the time, so it's not a pollutant in the same sense. But because of the flexibility under the Act, a lot of environmentalists wanted the EPA to use the Clean Air Act to regulate greenhouse gases, and eventually they sued the agency and won that case called Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007 in the Supreme Court. So in the last 6 years, we've been sort of seeing how that plays out as the EPA tries to use the Clean Air Act to regulate greenhouse gases.
Wait a minute, they sued the EPA because the EPA wasn't being aggressive enough? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. The EPA's position was that the Clean Air Act wasn't very well suited to dealing with this problem of greenhouse gas emissions, which is effectively the same as energy usage for the whole economy. And so they sort of want to say, let's wait and see. We're not going to say one way or the other whether the Clean Air Act has to be applied. The environmentalists and their state allies sued and said, you don't have that flexibility. The statute requires you to go ahead and regulate, and they won.
Okay. So let me this is, I think, an interesting point. Often we complain about the federal bureaucracy and how they want to do all kinds of things to us, the individuals back here in the States. But in fact, in this situation, they were reluctant, right? And it was the states that said you must do something.
Sure, and so it's a little ironic now when people claim that the EPA is usurping legislative authority and some sort of runaway agency, when in fact it was the courts that started them down this path.
Okay, and so they're now trying to regulate and more about these emissions. And where do these emissions come from that they're trying to regulate?
So one is from cars and trucks. They put out a regulation for that in 2010. It basically just involved ramping up the efficiency standards, those CAFE standards that all cars have to go. So over the next decade cars are going to have to become a lot more fuel efficient. The other big thing is about new power plants and existing power plants. Those are two different issues. On the new power plants, the EPA has proposed a rule last year. It's still waiting to be finalized, and we're going to see whether they sort of have the courage of their convictions, or the court's convictions for that matter. But that would basically prevent new coal power plants from being built in this country.
It would prevent new ones.
More or less, until we got better carbon sequestration technology that was commercially viable.
Okay. Well, we only have a few minutes, and I want to talk about two things about this. One is the sequestration you're talking about is not the sequestration, let's be clear about that, right?
Different issue altogether, yeah.
Altogether. What we're talking about here is just controlling the emissions. But for us in Nevada, because we're worried about Nevada, this really probably doesn't have any impact on Nevada, right? Because we don't use coal burning.
Well, right. So Nevada has a very high percentage of its power generated by natural gas and by renewables like solar. So Nevada's in a pretty good position not to be too negatively impacted. But of course, you're drawing some of your power from the grid from the neighboring states. So what happens to coal power plants there will affect you.
Okay. Well, I've got to end here, but that's an important point that where we are in Nevada. And I want to thank you for coming on to the show. And hopefully we'll have you back here in Nevada again soon. And we can have you back on the show on the Urban Report. Let's take a break and we'll come back shortly on the Urban Report.
For others, it may have just been a summer job. But for me, it was training. Now I'm an Air Force pararescueman, and my job is to save lives. Make the right choices today, and be ready for the challenges tomorrow. This message is brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
Think you found every hazard out here today? Think again. The spot you missed could be a killer. That spot on your skin could be skin cancer. Fact is, if you're a man over 50, you're in a group most likely to develop skin cancer, including melanoma, the kind that kills one person every hour. 1 in 5 Americans is likely to develop a form of skin cancer during their lifetime. That's why your best shot is to check for a spot. It's easy. Follow through and check your skin. It could be the save of a lifetime. Go to spotskincancer.org to find out how. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Winston, just one more inning, Grandma.
Ever notice how many things today kids can do without actually moving? A whole lot of things their parents used to do the hard way. So many kids' activities today seem to leave out the activity part, which makes exercise even more important for children. In fact, new research tells us the best time to enhance bone development is during childhood and adolescence. And just getting children to walk an extra 35 minutes a day could spare them the pain of thinning bones later in life. Healthy bones come from healthy habits. Encourage your kids to get up, get out, and get moving.
Hello.
Hey, Grandma, how about another grape soda?
A public service message on building strong bones for kids from the Pediatric Orthopedic Society of North America and the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
Hello, welcome back to the Urban Report. In this section of the Urban Report, we're going to meet with a fellow colleague here at the university, John Wagner. John is Director of Community Relations for our new initiative downtown at the 5th Street School. Welcome, John, to the Urban Report.
Thank you. Thank you.
And John, tell us a little bit about what it is that the 5th Street School is doing and what your role is as Director of Community Relations down at the 5th Street School.
Excellent, excellent. In order to kind of set the stage to understand why we are doing what we are doing, we need to look at the university as a whole. You know, we have more than 27,000 students, more than 700 instructional faculty, and that combination means that UNLV can be a tremendous resource to the community. And it is, and it has been. However, it has been difficult to know who to talk to. The university is very large and complicated and sprawling, housed in multiple colleges across campus. And so the idea was to create a headquarters of interagency collaboration and trust. That's what we are down at the Nonprofit Community and Leadership Initiative. We bring together multiple agencies, like the United Way, the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network, our own Office of Business Development, our Office of Civic Engagement and Diversity. And we bring those resources together to then implement through programmatic activities and education a method to enhance the community that we live in.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those initiatives. What are some of the things that you've been doing down there? What are the things that you've been studying and working on?
We've got some exciting projects right now. We just launched the Jameson Fellowship. One of the local philanthropists, Gar Jameson, contributed to enhance the degree of trust and collaboration between nonprofits specifically. Beyond that, we're also working on the...
Wait a minute. Let's stop. We'll get to that one. What does that mean to build trust up in the nonprofit community?
So there are currently organizations that exist to serve the chief executive officers of local nonprofits. However, networking at other important levels, but generally under-addressed levels, that initiative has not, programs to address that have not been implemented yet. And so what the Jameson Fellowship does is it networks everyone together so that they can move in a combined way to improve our community at the same time. So kind of a redundancy of networking.
Okay, but at a different level in the organizations.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there are, one of the other programs that we're working on is the UNLV Grantwell project. Our friends up north at BYU, they've created a very, very innovative program to educate our students while at the same time benefiting nonprofits and foundations. So imagine you have a class of nonprofit management students, and they are working to, well, we have two goals. We need to educate them, but we also need to integrate them into the community that will later hire them. So what they do is they establish a simulated foundation inside the class, except the board of directors of this foundation is comprised of actual practitioners and professors. Then the students assume the actual roles that they would assume in real life, allowing them to have management experience and development opportunities. And then they work with philanthropists and foundations to articulate what they hope to accomplish with their donations, and then help them write the request for proposals. So that is enhanced. And at the same time, when nonprofits apply and actually submit their grants, our students will work with those nonprofits to write better grants. So it's a triple win for the same donation.
So these are students who are in our nonprofit certificate program, right?
Correct.
Our graduate program in nonprofit.
Yeah.
And they're taking courses also. This is one of the other things. They're down at the 5th Street School taking classes.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely. One of the benefits of being kind of in the center of the community is that we have easier access than perhaps having to come onto campus and having to park on campus, which can be difficult at times. But we are down there in the center of it all, bringing together multiple agencies and multiple resources to improve the sector. We're also having, for example, an nonprofit expo that we're going to do in October to allow nonprofits to see what other nonprofits are doing, to collaborate where it makes sense. And then our job is also to integrate the public sector with the nonprofit sector, because we exist to support both. So this December, in coordination with the ASPA, the American Society for Public
Administration.
Yes. We are going to do a co-conference with ASPA and nonprofits side by side with tracks that will overlap and fully integrate the two different sides. That's exactly what we exist to do, is to bring together all of the stakeholders so that we can work at the same time to make the community a better place.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and one of the reasons why we in the College of Urban Affairs are, we went down there purposely. This was an intentional kind of thing to try to make sure that people know, as you said at the very beginning, that the university wants to be integrated in the community. We just have a very short time, but you mentioned some other agencies. Can you name off some of those other agencies that are actually, I think some are actually working with us downtown?
The United Way, the Chamber of Commerce, the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network, and then several, the ASPA, as we said before.
And the city.
And the city of Las Vegas, and the county. Yeah, there's.
Okay. Well, we have to end this. We have to take another break here. But I did want to bring you down here and talk to you about this because I think this is an exciting effort and it shows how we in the College of Urban Affairs and the university want to be integrated in the community. And John, I want to thank you for your efforts and your work down there, and I want to thank you for coming in for this edition of the Urban Report. We'll take a short break now and come back to our third guest in a minute.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay.
If you could see anything in the world, what would it be?
I'd love to see Paris.
I like to see cupcakes falling from the sky.
My daughter, married and happy.
I want to see things the way I used to.
Chances are, someone you love may one day be affected by macular degeneration or glaucoma. Log on to seeabettertomorrow.org or call 1-800-437-2423 to learn about glaucoma and macular degeneration. Call 1-800-437-2423 or log on to seeabettertomorrow.org.
I just want to see more of the things I love.
I remember the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
That moment?
It was a moment that changed my life. I'd been training with my team for months, and now we had been called up for the first time. The real deal. Wildfires were getting dangerously close to homes. At that moment, I got my first taste of just how important the Guard is to my community.
See how the Guard can be an important part of your life at NationalGuard.com.
At what age is the color that your skin was meant to be no longer beautiful? Every year, millions of young women try to change the skin they were born with and say they die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Melanoma is the second most common cancer in teens and young adults, and one person dies from melanoma every hour. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Something's not right.
My first symptoms were
constant tingling in my toes.
My legs, sometimes they'll go numb.
I had double vision. They said you have multiple sclerosis.
Well, the beginning is the hardest time.
Kind of had to get a grasp on reality.
I had to adapt and change very rapidly.
I had to learn how to drive with my hands. Yeah, that was interesting.
I was a dancer. I don't see walking the way I walk any different than doing a dance. It just looks different. It's a different dance.
You see me have an off day, it doesn't take away from who I am.
A symptom may cause you not to be able to do that anymore. And at one point, I wasn't able to do any of those.
But I would exercise every day.
Since I've been cycling, it's definitely helped my walking.
To make a lot of changes in my life and just adapt to it.
I'm going to acknowledge its presence. I'm not going to discount it. But at the same time, I'm going to try my best to not let it stop me.
It's a fantastic opportunity to be working together with a common goal of curing MS, and sharing is the key.
Hello again. I want to welcome you back to our third segment of the Urban Report today. And I am privileged to have actually my ophthalmologist on, Dr. Mark Doubrava. Mark, do you want to give us a little bit about your background? You're an ophthalmologist here in town. How long have you been practicing here in town?
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I've been in town now going on 15 years. I actually grew up here in Las Vegas. Family moved here in 1973, and I went to public schools here in town and did my undergraduate work at UNLV and attended medical school at UNR. From there, I did some clinical research at Jules Stein Eye Institute at UCLA. Then I did my internship at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas for a year. And after that, did ophthalmology training, a 4-year residency in ophthalmology at the LSU Eye Center in New Orleans, Louisiana. And then my wife and I returned back in 1997 to Las Vegas, and I set up practice then.
Okay, so 1997. You came back, but you are a product of our university.
That's right.
And we're proud of that. We're always proud to have people who graduate from here, go away, but then decide to come back. So as an ophthalmologist, what are the major issues for us for people, you know, we talk about a variety of things, and we can talk about what it means for seniors, but what are the major issues that we have to confront or face with our eye care, improper eye care?
Well, one thing I like to remind people of, if they have an eye problem, they may or may not know it. Not all eye conditions would affect someone's vision right away or something that the patient or person would notice. And one condition that comes to mind is glaucoma. And glaucoma can usually strike in midlife, 40s and 50s, and a patient may not necessarily have any symptoms. They have no pain, and they don't realize that they're losing peripheral vision a little at a time. So that's why it's important to periodically have a thorough eye exam.
Well, I want to talk some more about this, but when you say periodically, what do we mean by periodically?
You know, the American Academy of Ophthalmology has a certain schedule what they recommend eye exams, and usually one exam, you know, during the adolescent years, unless there was something found on a screening. You know, usually when I was going to school, we had like a kindergarten, there was a screening, and if the school nurse noticed any type of deviation of the eyes, or if they noticed blurred vision, usually the nurse would recommend to the parents, have your child's eyes examined. Well, if a child has a normal vision and throughout grade school and then usually in adolescent years an eye exam, and if it's normal, maybe a few years later, 2, 3 years later. But if there's any blurred vision, then a patient would usually start to come in every 2 years or so.
All right, look, can I just ask you, this is a kind of personal question
All
on
right.
this. So you go there, you go to the ophthalmologist, and your eyes get worse. Well, how is it that they get worse? I mean, that you continually have to get your glasses changed?
Well, throughout life, if someone does have to wear glasses, every year or two, there can be subtle changes in the prescription based on the hydration of the eye or the intraocular pressure of the eye. That can have a subtle impact on what a prescription would be. And sometimes we have astigmatism, which is a term just to describe the shape of the eye, and that can change throughout life.
So that shape of the eye changes?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I got you off track. I want to let's talk about glaucoma.
Okay.
So glaucoma is?
Glaucoma is a term we use if there is, traditionally if there was intraocular pressure that was high, higher than normal. And what can happen over time is the optic nerve, I have this little model here just to show everybody. Go ahead.
Well, when you say intraocular pressure, what does that mean? Where is that pressure coming from?
Sure.
Okay.
It's almost like, I tell patients, it's like the tire pressure on the automobile. The eye itself is filled with fluid, and it does create fluid, and that will give it a pressure. And that's independent of somebody's blood pressure. So those are two separate things. And what happens with glaucoma, if there's elevated intraocular pressure, that can damage the optic nerve over time. And if the nerve is damaged, a person will lose peripheral vision and not even know it because it's happening so slowly. Unfortunately, if it's not detected and not treated, eventually that person will lose vision in the eye. And
they're losing vision in a sense because it's peripheral, and as and more and more
it encroaches to the center, and pretty soon they'll have no vision, blindness.
Okay. But can you stop that? And is that the reason to go and find out what?
That's one reason to have periodic eye examinations and evaluations, have your intraocular pressure checked, have the optic nerve examined, and we do visual field testing. And if we detect some type of peripheral damage, then there's certain eye drops that are used to help decrease the eye pressure. Sometimes laser surgery is necessary, or more advanced surgery.
Okay, so that's, and that, it tends to be one of the major issues that we focus in on, right? I mean, obviously, because it has the potential to cause blindness, right? Now, there are two other things that, as I get older and others get older, we worry about, right?
I think I know what you're leading to. The other two entities that can affect us as we get older, cataract formation and macular degeneration. And if I may just touch on cataract, fortunately, that is usually treated, and it is a pretty straightforward procedure nowadays. And that would be this part of the eye here up front. If you turn that, that's the front of the eye.
Right.
And then we're all born with a natural clear lens. It's that lens that over time becomes opacified. and then the doctor
Wait
will
a minute.
refer to it.
Wait a minute now, you used the medical term here. Let's
Okay.
tell for the public, what happens to the lens?
Well, that lens, instead of being clear, will become cloudy.
Okay. A film develops.
Many people use the term film, but they think that it might be a film that grows over the top of the eye, and that's not correct. It's that lens that just through natural processes will become cloudy.
Okay. And is that something that we can't deal with in terms of trying to prevent that? It just
There's really nothing to prevent it as far as vitamins or supplements or certain diet. There's a lot of some theories out there, but pretty much there's nothing that we recommend. We do recommend sunglasses. We like to reduce the amount of UV exposure, ultraviolet light exposure.
Okay. So there's some relationship between that. So that's our issue with cataracts, and we can have surgery to correct that.
Yes, and
right?
with the surgery, small instrument, small incision, we remove that cataract lens and we replace it with an artificial implant lens.
Oh, okay, so we put in artificial. And some people tell me that, in fact, for me, if I were to have that, I might actually not have to wear glasses or something. For some people, is that correct?
That is correct. With certain specific measurements, when that surgery is performed and the intraocular lens is placed, it can reduce somebody's dependence upon glasses quite a bit.
Okay. Now, the third thing, we just have a few minutes left here, a minute or so left. The third issue for us is macular degeneration.
That's right, macular degeneration. And unfortunately, that's a disease that as the population continues to get older and we live longer, there's more people affected by this condition. The macula is part of the retina. It's where when you focus on somebody's face or letters on the wall, it all goes right to the bullseye, right to the macular area. And in some people, there's degeneration. I describe it to some of my patients. It's like arthritis of the eye, that some people get it and some people don't. We don't know all the reasons.
But that can cause then
loss of central vision.
But not peripheral vision.
That's right.
Okay. So this is an interesting thing. We have to sort of wrap this up. Again, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And what you're saying is that we ought to be going to see the ophthalmologist for making sure that our eyes are healthy eyes.
Correct.
Right.
Some people might think that, hey, I'm seeing fine, so there's no problem. But we encourage them to at least periodically have a full eye exam to just make sure everything's okay.
Okay. And I want to welcome you I want to thank you for watching the Urban Report today. So thank you again, and we appreciate you for being on the show.
I enjoyed it.